I, 27, am a recently divorced mother of two. My ex-husband Dylan, 27, and I were married for 5 years until we divorced last year. I've been through tons of stuff these past few months, dealing with the kids and the divorce in addition to the situation with my ex-Mill. I was trying to deal with it as best I could, until my ex-Mill came knocking at my door a few days ago, apologizing for everything. Let me get y'all caught up. Dylan and I have known each other since we were kids. Our moms were best friends, and I mean best friends. They had grown up with each other, went to school together, and even got married and had kids around the same time. It was one of those rare friendships that come once in a lifetime. They were each other's ride or die, as we say these days. So, it was obvious that Dylan and I also got super close. Our moms would take us on playdates with each other, they'd take turns dropping us at school and picking us up from practice. While growing up, it was as if we had two mothers who loved and took care of us equally. Throughout our childhood, Dylan and I were always coupled together. It was as if people almost knew that we'd end up together, not to mention, our moms joked about it all the time. They used to say that Dylan and I getting together would finally make them related in some way. I honestly hated when they would poke fun at us, mainly because I had a massive crush on Dylan and would get embarrassed every time they teased us. Especially when it was clear that 8-year-old him had other priorities like basketball and cars and wasn't in the least bit interested in me. 8-year-old me would have never believed that our parents were right and that one day we would actually end up together. Little 8-year-old me would probably have also had a stroke if she found out how our relationship ultimately turned out. My ex-Mill, let's call her Glenda, 63, was like my second mother. My mom worked a lot and came home late in the evenings, so I'd spend most of my time after school at Glenda's house. She had always wanted a daughter but only had Dylan, so she would always call me the daughter she never had. I truly loved her as a mother. She would buy me my favorite treats and every Christmas, I was sure that she would knit me a new cardigan. That's just how she was. Things were just great until my mom got diagnosed with cancer when I was 14. It came as a shock to all of us, and I remember that I felt like my world was crumbling around me when I first heard the news. It wasn't looking good. The cancer was diagnosed at a late stage and there wasn't much anyone could do except hope and pray that the chemotherapy would work. For the next 2 years, my mom weakened in front of my eyes. I was so used to her being so energetic and full of life that it hurt me to see her just wasting away. She went for all her chemo sessions and began losing all her hair. She lost tons of weight and became very frail. During this time, I was a mess. I was so worried about my mom, and Glenda was the only one I could speak to because I knew that she was one of the few people who understood how I felt. My dad barely had any time to be sad. He was working overtime to pay for all the medical bills, and the last thing I wanted to do was put more pressure on him. Glenda took care of everything. She became my mother's caretaker and made sure that I didn't have to worry about anything and focus on school. She made all the food, made sure my mom took her meds, and made sure that I was doing as well as I could considering the situation. After battling cancer like a warrior for 2 years, my mother peacefully passed away surrounded by all her loved ones when I was 16. It was one of the worst days of my life. I remember feeling as if I would never be happy again because I had lost my best friend. My dad, Glenda, and I grieved together. Glenda helped me through it. I remember that for a few weeks after my mom passed, I stopped eating, showering, and going to school. Glenda sat me down and told me that my mother would never want to see me like this and that she would curse her from heaven if she did nothing to cheer me up. It was the first time I smiled in months. Over the next couple of years, I started hanging out at Glenda's every day. She always knew how to make me feel better, and she was one of the few people that I trusted and loved. I got even closer to Dylan. He was in his bad boy phase and was hanging around with the wrong sort of people, but somehow, this made him even more attractive to me. I blame the teenage hormones. He also began taking an interest in me and I was very flattered. We started hanging out and it became clear that we had started developing feelings for each other, but even back then, it was as if I loved him more than he loved me. We'd be together all the time in private, but in public, he'd act pretty indifferent to me. I didn't mind too much because he kept telling me how much he loved me and how he was planning on marrying me when we got older. Pro tip, ladies, this type of behavior is a massive red flag. A man who truly loves you will never be embarrassed to show you off publicly. I learned this the hard way. I did feel bad sometimes when Dylan would ignore me. I felt as if I was not worthy enough for him to fully accept me. I based my entire self-worth on whether he liked me or not. Again, this is a very harmful mindset to have. Never base your self-worth on anyone's opinion except your own. We started dating secretly for 2 whole years and there were many times when I just wanted to let everyone know that we were together. Dylan would sometimes flirt with other girls right in front of me, and then when I'd get mad about it, he'd tell me that I was making a big deal and that he was just trying to keep up with his image. Now when I look back at his behavior, it's sad to think how little I thought of myself. I was still in a very emotionally vulnerable state and needed comfort, which he provided. I disregarded all his red flags and let him walk all over me just because I didn't want to let him go for the times he did make me feel good. I was so naive. I should have known better. When we were 19, I had finally had enough of being sidelined and practically pleaded with him to come out publicly with our relationship. After ages, he finally agreed. Glenda was the happiest when she found out. She embraced me and said that she always knew that we'd end up together because it was fate. Glenda knew that her son wasn't exactly the best and was hanging with the wrong sort of people, and somewhere deep down she felt as if being in a relationship with him would help him change. Honestly, I felt the same way. I truly believed that I could positively change Dylan and make him a better person. Dylan kept drinking, he dropped out of high school and could never hang on to a job for more than a few months. He spent most of his time hanging out with his gang friends. Since I had known him for ages, I believed that he still could turn his life around, and I felt that being in a serious relationship with me would help him get his act together. Needless to say, I was very wrong. No matter how much I tried to help Dylan, he reverted back to his old ways. I would constantly get him job interviews which he wouldn't attend. I enrolled him for courses so that he could gain more skills, but he never showed up. I sent him to therapy to help him get sober, but nothing worked. Meanwhile, I was in college and working double shifts to earn money to support the both of us. Glenda was constantly stressed because of Dylan and his antics. She worried herself sick about our future and at one point was actually scared that he was going to do something to himself. Another year passed and Dylan went from bad to worse. I was beginning to think of ending things when our entire lives changed. Glenda suffered from a heart attack. I got a call in the middle of the night and we rushed to the hospital. By God's grace, she was stable and had to be admitted for a few days. They ran a few more tests and found out that she was suffering from coronary heart disease and had very high blood pressure. In addition, she also suffered from arrhythmias, heart rhythm disorder, which if left uncontrolled could be fatal. The doctors said that she was lucky to even be alive. I thanked the Lord that she was okay, but I was still shocked that she was so unwell this whole time. The doctor put her on a strict diet. She had to do a certain amount of physical exercise daily as well as take a ton of medications. The main thing the doctor told us was that her heart was extremely fragile and she shouldn't be under any kind of stress because that could trigger another arrhythmia, and this time she wouldn't be as lucky. I was just grateful that she was alive. I was also the one who had to pay for all the hospital expenses because Dylan had nothing. I didn't mind because I would do anything for her. After we brought her back home, I noticed a drastic change in Dylan. I think this whole thing was a reality check for him. I could tell that he was completely shaken by the thought of losing his mom and that he became a completely different person. He started helping his mom every day, got an actual job, and started paying his share of the rent and bills. His attitude to me changed as well. For the first time, he was actually appreciating me, taking me out on dates and showering me with love. This had been a harrowing experience for all of us, but the fact that Dylan had changed for the better was the best thing that came out of it. In the months that followed, Dylan and I took good care of Glenda. We made sure that she followed her routine and took her for checkups to make sure everything was fine. I was so happy to see how involved Dylan was. I was even more attracted to him now. When we were 21, Dylan proposed. I said yes. And a year later, we were married. Glenda was thrilled. I still remember the speech she gave at the wedding. She said that she had always thought of me as a daughter, and now that I was married to Dylan, it was official and she couldn't be happier. She said the only thing she wished for was for my mom to see this because she would have been happier than ever. I graduated that same year and managed to secure a pretty well-paying job at a firm. It was quite a distance from the apartment that I shared with Dylan, which was closer to Glenda. However, the commute was getting too tedious for me, and even though I didn't want to go too far from her, we decided that it was best if we got an apartment closer to my work. Glenda was all for it, so we moved the following year. I was still uneasy being far away from Glenda, so I decided to keep a caretaker with her at all times. It was expensive, but it gave me peace of mind. Our first year of marriage was bliss. I loved this new and improved version of Dylan. He helped out with all the bills even though he was earning significantly less than me. He did chores and was a great help. The fact that he was more romantic than ever was the cherry on top. Within the year, we were pregnant. This was a little unexpected because it was still so early in our marriage, but I felt secure enough to bring a baby into this world. Glenda was thrilled about becoming a grandma. I gave birth to my first daughter Mary and we started settling into parenthood. Now, being a parent is no easy task. It's a lifelong commitment and the start is definitely rough. I immediately bonded with my daughter and I didn't mind the sleepless nights and the stinky diapers. I enjoyed every aspect of it. Dylan on the other hand did not adapt that well. After the birth of her daughter, he barely helped take care of her. I was the one who did everything. When I confronted him about this, he said that he was scared of holding her and that this was not what he signed up for. He said that he had no idea that babies were this much work. I was startled. He was being so immature and I was already dealing with so much as it is. His uninvolvement when it came to looking after Mary led to huge fights. At one point, I decided that there was no point in arguing and took care of her all by myself. To make matters worse, Dylan got fired from his job. Instead of finding a new one, he went back to his old ways and started hanging out at home. This time around, he stopped doing the chores and completely ignored Mary. I had to go back to work early from my maternity leave because we needed the money desperately. Dylan didn't want to look after Mary, so I had to hire a babysitter despite him being at home. This was an added expense that we could not afford, but there was no other option. I contemplated asking Glenda to help take care of the baby, but she was already weak and I didn't want to put her under more stress. Dylan started drinking again. He'd come back home absolutely sloshed and incoherent. Once again, I tried sending him to AA meetings, therapy, everything, but nothing seemed to work. He wasn't getting a job and my patience was running thin. The biggest blow came when I found out that I was pregnant again. We didn't plan this and there was no way we could afford another baby. I was the only one who was working and we were barely scraping by. Mind you, I was paying for the babysitter, Glenda's caretaker, and Dylan's therapy in addition to the bills and rent. I was burning myself out while Dylan made absolutely no effort to change. There were huge cracks in our marriage now and I was regretting marrying him. There were many times when I contemplated telling Glenda everything. She had always given me the best advice. I knew the doctor said that she shouldn't be under stress and these matters would stress her beyond anything, so I kept my mouth shut. Whenever she called, I acted as if everything was fine. Even Dylan had the sense not to stress her out, so even he behaved in the same way. However, he was immature and not ready to take on the responsibility that came along with marriage and fatherhood. With another baby on the way, Dylan had worsened. He said that this was all a huge mistake and told me to get rid of the baby. I was appalled even to hear him suggest that. Yes, it was going to be difficult raising 2 kids, but things would be way easier if he took some initiative and got a job. We kept arguing all the time. He'd not come back home on most days and the whole atmosphere at home was terrible and it was beginning to affect Mary. I reached my breaking point when I caught him having an affair with our babysitter. I was not surprised, neither was I hurt. I didn't love him anymore and neither did he. I knew the only reason he was even with me was because I put a roof over his head and paid all his bills. He needed me, I didn't need him. In fact, my life would be easier without him mooching off of me. He didn't seem in the least bit guilty that he was cheating on me. Honestly, he was a pathetic excuse of a man and I wish that I had left him ages ago. He was disgusting in all aspects. I decided to separate from him. He protested saying that he needed me when all he needed was my money, but this time, I had had enough. I had no more feelings for him, all he was to me was my life's biggest regret. After a while, he gave up the act and told me that the only reason he married me was because I was a safe option that his mother approved of. He married me so that his mom would get off his back once and for all. I suppose he was trying to hurt me, but honestly, I didn't care. I was so fed up with him that I was relieved when he left with the babysitter. After giving birth to my younger daughter, we began the divorce proceedings. Dylan didn't want custody of the 2 kids, which was good because he wasn't capable of looking after them either way. He got a rude surprise when he came to know that he would still have to pay child support for both of them. Honestly, I could manage just fine without him, but I would be a fool to say no to extra money. The divorce was finalized and we began living separately. In other news, Glenda had no idea. Her condition was getting worse despite all the precautions we took and she had just recently had an angioplasty and was recovering. Dylan and I decided to not tell her about the divorce until we were sure she could handle it. Away from Dylan, my life was much easier. I was able to get a babysitter for both kids and after my maternity leave, I went straight to work to earn more cash. I began to realize that Dylan was just added weight that was just dragging me down. Without him, I was able to save not only my money but my mental sanity as well. My kids and I were thriving. Meanwhile, I heard that Dylan still didn't have a job and was on the verge of breaking up with his girlfriend. He barely was able to keep up with the child support payments, but he wasn't my problem anymore. I somehow managed to convince Glenda that everything was fine because she still wasn't doing that good and she bought it. A few months later, I got a call from the bank saying that there had been an increase in the frequency of withdrawals from Glenda's account. I usually added a certain amount of money to her account every month and she barely made any withdrawals, let alone multiple times a week for months. She had her entire life savings in there and I knew that she would have told me if there was an unexpected expense. I visited the bank and they told me that the money had been withdrawn and deposited to none other than Dylan's account. I was furious. This pathetic man was stealing from his own mother. Glenda had no idea that her money was being debited. I requested the bank to block Glenda's account and prevent any more withdrawals unless she herself did it and stormed straight to his house. When I confronted him, he said that I should mind my own business because it was his mother's money and he could do whatever he wanted with it. I told him that I was the one who was depositing money into her account and he had no right to use her money, especially without her knowledge. He began getting aggressive and calling me all sorts of names. I told him that I blocked the account and there was no way he would be able to access it anymore. I told him to get a job and spend his own money on his GF instead of mooching off his sick mother. Barely a week later, I got the worst phone call of my life. It was from Glenda. I had never heard her sound so sad before. Let me sum it up quickly. Dylan was furious at me for blocking him from his Glenda's account. He went against his promise of not involving her in our matters and played the victim card. He met Glenda and filled her head with all sorts of lies. He told her that I forced him to have kids and used up all his savings. He also that I was the one who constantly cheated on him and abused him. When he couldn't take it anymore and suggested separating, I threatened him by saying that I would give Glenda a heart attack by making up all sorts of lies about him and finishing her once and for all. Out of fear for his mother's life, Dylan decided to continue staying in this loveless marriage. I couldn't believe that he had stopped to this level. He reversed the cards and victimized himself. On top of that, he told Glenda that I was the one who had been stealing out of her account every month and even called the bank to confirm the withdrawals. Oh, also, I had stolen away his kids even after he begged me to share custody with him. Yeah, he is the ultimate scumbag. He went and told Glenda all these lies and she believed him. She called me up to say that she had no idea that I was such a vile human and that she was ashamed that she ever thought of me as a daughter. What hurt the most was when she said that my mother would have been so disappointed in me if she were alive. She also said that I was such a pathetic wife, there was no wonder why Dylan decided to have an affair and leave me. She said that she supported it and I deserved it. Lastly, she said that she didn't want to see my face ever again and hung up. I wanted to tell Glenda the truth so badly, but I knew that she wouldn't be able to take it. This whole mess was already a huge shock to her and she was very weak. I knew if she got any more stress, she literally could die. I kept quiet. I didn't say a word. It didn't matter if she thought I was a villain. If me being a bad person kept her alive, then so be it. I loved Glenda too much to have her death on my hands, so I shut my mouth and accepted everything she said. I would protect her no matter what. Dylan and I had a massive argument regarding this and ultimately, I chose my peace. I figured that there was no point arguing with an idiot like him because it just led to more problems. Although it hurt to not speak to Glenda anymore, I began to move on with my life and focus on my work and kids. Around 9 months passed and I had no contact with Glenda until last week. I got a call from the hospital saying that Glenda had suffered a stroke and wanted to speak with me urgently. I rushed to the hospital. Glenda looked very weak. The doctors said that this stroke could have been fatal, but luckily, her caretaker brought her in early. Glenda looked at me with tears in her eyes and at that moment, I knew that she knew the truth. She apologized to me and it was difficult for her to even talk with all the tubes. She said that she was sorry for ever trusting Dylan over me. Apparently, in these past few months, Dylan had taken and used up all of Glenda's savings. She didn't even have enough money to pay for her hospital stay. When she found out that her money was being withdrawn, she cornered Dylan and demanded an explanation. He denied all the claims and blamed me, but she didn't believe him. Finally, he admitted to everything. He told her that he had lied about me and had used up all her money. Glenda said that after hearing everything, she felt extremely uneasy and wanted to rush to meet me, but she fainted and was brought to the hospital. The minute she regained consciousness, she called me to apologize. I couldn't believe what a loser Dylan was. I told Glenda that she didn't need to apologize, the only reason I hid the truth from her was so that I could protect her. She said she wasn't worthy of my kindness and that she should have realized that Dylan was the problem in our marriage all along. I promised her that she didn't need to worry about anything and that I'd stick by her no matter what. She is currently still in the ICU. She is doing better, but we don't know what the future holds. Dylan is too ashamed to even show his face. I visit her every day and am barely able to pay the bills. Am I being stupid by doing this? Should I just take her home and let her spend her last days in peace? Also, how do I tackle Dylan? I am so stressed and just need a break. Update 1. Hi. Wow, so many of you are calling me all sorts of names on here. Yes, I was stupid for not leaving Dylan earlier. Don't you think I know that? Y'all are being so unnecessarily rude over the wrong things. Dylan literally caused his mother to have a stroke and y'all are just brushing over that and blaming me for random things. Please stop. I have way too much on my plate already. I have also got a bunch of supportive comments. Thank you so much. You have no idea what it means to me. Moving on to the update, it's been almost a month since my last post. Glenda is still hanging on, but it looks like her heart is about to give out. Her blood pressure is still high and she is being constantly monitored. Dylan finally came to his senses and apologized for everything. Not that it would make much of a difference, he's already ruined all our lives. I can't bear to even look at him. I made it very clear to him that if he didn't give back all the money that he had taken from Glenda's account, I would contact the police and then he would be in even more trouble. Dylan already has a bunch of felonies, so I know that the last thing he wants is having the police involved. He promised to help pay the medical bills and so far, has been contributing to everything, which is the least he can do. Glenda refuses to see him. She says that even the thought of him gives her hypertension. Glenda is going through so much, but is still putting on a brave front. I was able to bring the kids to see her yesterday, and even though it was for a little while, she completely brightened up. The doctors are trying their best, but it doesn't loom promising. We're still hoping and praying, and I would appreciate it if you could too. Update 2. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for all your well wishes and prayers. Glenda is improving quite a bit and is finally out of the ICU, which is great for all of us. The doctors say that she is stable enough to leave the hospital. All our prayers have worked. She is getting discharged next week. She is still very high risk and doesn't have much time, but she is getting stronger and wants to leave the hospital more than ever. She says that when her time comes, she wants to be at home with her grandkids and not connected to tubes and machines. Surprisingly, Dylan has managed to give back all the money that he had taken. I don't know how long this act is going to last this time, because the same thing happened to him last time as well and we all know how that turned out. Anyway, Glenda and him are still not on speaking terms. I don't think she is ever going to forgive him. I finally feel like Dylan feels guilty for what he has done, but honestly, I am done giving him the benefit of the doubt. he is just facing the consequences of his own actions. Anyway, I'll keep y'all updated. Update 3, hey guys. Sorry, it's been ages since my last update. I've been seeing so many comments asking how Glenda is doing and wondering if everything is okay since I haven't been active on here. Glenda is fine, no, she isn't dead. I saw so many comments saying that she passed away, but no, she is still very much alive. I have also seen many comments asking me to start a GoFundMe for donations for her treatment. While I do support the sentiment, I will not be taking any donations for Glenda. Thankfully I have enough to manage all her bills. Either way, thank you for being so kind and supportive. Like I said, Glenda is doing fine. She got discharged a couple of months ago and is now living with me and the kids at our apartment. I have hired a full-time nurse to monitor her when I'm not home. The nurse also helps out with the kids, which is fantastic. Glenda has been improving day by day. I don't know what it is, maybe it's the fact that she is with her grandkids. Whatever it is, I am so happy that she's okay. She is even walking around and playing with the girls. It brings tears to my eyes whenever I see them together and I just want to freeze the moment forever. Honestly, it's a miracle that we even have her right now. The doctors told us that there was a slim chance that she was even going to be discharged, but here she is, still thriving. We have been inseparable since her discharge and it's as if she's making up for lost time. I'm so happy to have her. Last week, she told me that she should have known that I was protecting her this whole time because that would have been exactly what my mom would have done too. I nearly bawled. As for Dylan, he visits occasionally, but none of us care. He is trying to get to know the girls, but the minute he starts acting funky, he is not going to be in touch with them again. I can't let them go through the trauma that I have been through. Dylan and I are not on good terms, but if he's planning on stepping up to be a good dad, I am no one to stop him. As of now, everything seems to be fine and we're taking each day in stride. I would appreciate it if you continue to keep Glenda in your prayers.